Welcome to the Beverly Hills Plastic Surgery Podcast. I am Dr. J. Calvert, and today I am here with my most valuable co-host, Dr. Millicent Rovelo. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and I'm feeling super valuable. I'm feeling super valued.
Well, you are, and I am glad that you feel valuable because we're going to talk about what is plastic surgery worth?
What is it worth?
What's it worth?
How many appendages and kidneys would you sell?
And that's what it comes down to, people.
Except for the
It's
people
not cheap.
that did lose kidneys, but we won't talk about that story.
I've tried to get them on the podcast, but we won't talk about
We'll
it.
talk about that.
Nope, we'll let that go.
No, we're not being exactly that literal, but kind of.
No, it's true.
The whole point of this particular podcast is going to be, why does plastic surgery cost what it does? Why is there variation amongst different surgeons in different places for plastic surgery? And should it cost what it does?
And I will tell you a from today story that two of my office staff members were on with a patient who was referred in by one of our good friends of the practice, trying to explain why there is a $500 consultation fee to see me. And the patient just was like, but this doctor is more famous than Dr. Calvert. Why is his consultation fee less? And I was told that I didn't have to pay the consultation fee if I was referred in. And my staff was like, that's not true.
That's not a thing.
There is a consultation fee. It costs $500. It is, we waive it for, some reconstructive cases, but we always take a credit card hold there's always something. You have to understand that things cost money in plastic surgery.
Things cost money. And in our part of the world, for sure, there is definitely a fair amount of looky-loos that come by and are not necessarily serious about booking surgery, or they want to get a couple of opinions, or maybe down the road they're thinking of surgery, or maybe they've seen this plastic surgeon on TV and they want to meet them in person or something like that. So if we're spending 30, 45 minutes with a patient, like imagine what your lawyer would charge for those 30 to 45 minutes.
I don't even want to imagine.
Right? I don't even want to see that bill. So it's like,
I don't even want to imagine. It's a lot.
A lot of practices, if you pay the consult fee, it's way, if you have surgery, it's added towards your surgery cost or deducted from your surgery cost or whatever.
Correct. That's exactly what we do.
In which case, it's a win-win. You don't actually have to pay additional fees for that consult. But if you're one of those people that's kind of just looking to see what's out there, well, you're also using up that plastic surgeon's time, his very valuable time.
Yeah, so pay
the time
for it.
that she spent, going to school and learning and studying and paying off student loans and, has a practice to support. Like, you can't just take up 45 minutes of their time for free.
No. And that's the question that I wanted to address with this podcast, and is what is it worth? Like, what's your plastic surgery worth? Because there's a lot of, for instance, Botox is like marketed as a price per unit treatment. But that doesn't take into account that the injector is really good or really bad or knows what they're doing or doesn't know what they're doing. They've commoditized Botox into a price per unit.
But people who do have more experience and are better at it do tend to charge more per unit.
Of course, but it shouldn't even be charged by the unit. It should be charged as a treatment. And the people at Allergan were geniuses to make the injector irrelevant. And it doesn't matter if that injector has been out of school for 30 days or 30 years, it's priced by the unit. And that's genius, because if the consumer actually knew how bad some injectors are and how little they know about what they're doing,
it's scary.
They'd run the other way. They wouldn't look for the cheap deal. They'd be like, I want somebody who knows what they're doing, who can actually make me look better with this stuff, rather than, hey, I can pay a really cheap price for this Botox per unit, except, the person that's injecting me doesn't know what it does and doesn't understand what it is, and they've only been doing it for 2 weeks.
It's actually terrifying. I had
a
practitioner that was, or mid-level, that was practicing with me once, and something came up and she had to dilute the Botox differently than we typically do it. And I was like, oh, use this many units, for that, whatever. And she could not do the calculations. She was like, well, I was trained to put this amount in per vial. And I was like, so how many units is that per 0.cc? And she was like, I don't know. So this is how I was trained. I was like some people just don't even know, like, the whys and the hows.
Of course.
They were just taught like cookie cutter training, and they have no understanding of like the art and the science behind what they do.
So let's up the ante a little bit and talk about surgery, because what's it worth to have plastic surgery that's done by somebody who has 20 years of experience, 2 years of experience, 5 years of experience? Well, it depends on what that experience is, doesn't it?
It depends on the experience, because
That's right.
just because you've been in practice for 20 years does not necessarily mean that your results are exponentially better than someone that's been in practice for 5, 10 years. So it's not a linear association. But there certainly is a correlation. You know, certainly someone that's been in practice a lot longer, has done a lot more procedures, has a lot more experience, theoretically should have a better track record and should have a better understanding and concept of how surgeries go. But it's not always true.
Well, let's also, just for the record, let people know that complications happen no matter how much experience or how little experience a surgeon has. Complications can occur. What you're looking at, and this is what I've come to understand about my own practice. Why? Okay, so I do a lot of different things. I do rhinoplasty, revision rhinoplasty, facelifts, and breast surgery. That's my bulk of what I do. That's probably 97% of what I do. Every once in a while, one of my wife's friends will get me to do a tummy tuck, and I love doing it. It's fun, and I do 6 a year or whatever. But there's not. But the facial implants I do a lot of, but that's all in the facelift kind of world. But the value of why people will come, and I've come to realize it just from how frequently, it's all about reliability. It's all about are you stacking the cards in your favor with the surgeon you've chosen to have surgery with, and have you looked at their profile of what goes wrong? I got a 1-star review from a patient that I did a primary rhinoplasty on, and her review was right. She didn't put in there that she looks way better and she got a great, she went from not great looking to good looking. None of that stuff is in her review, but her review basically said, my nose wasn't really that crooked to begin with, and it's still crooked, and he tried to fix it a few times, and it's still crooked, and I'm unsatisfied, not happy with my results. She didn't put in there that she went from a hook nose, ugly hump, and she looks really pretty now. That's not in the review. But I wanted it straighter, and it's not straight, and so he gets a 1-star review from it. And I went, yeah, okay. It's true. I tried a lot of different things. And then I started realizing, every time she came in, she smelled like smoke. And then I was I think she's probably still smoking. There was a lot of things that, when I look back and do the math, I was I couldn't get straight because she was killing the grafts that I was using to straighten it. Irrelevant. The point is, I'm really experienced. I've done over 6,000 rhinoplasties. I still got a patient with a 1-star review that's not happy because it's not perfectly straight. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. But everybody else who came with their, the other, 400 patients for the last, 2 or 3 years are really happy with their noses. So you're looking for the reliability, and you're looking for that. If my complication profile is I look better and I have a crooked nose and it's not perfectly straight, maybe that's somebody I'm going to sign up with because that's not a disaster. That's not the
Right.
So you're looking for the reliability. So what is it worth? Should you pay more for that? I remember I did have another review that was also 1-star, but she took it down because I got so many patients from it because she did post her photos, and she was beautiful. She went from I have a terrible nose, awful, to looking absolutely beautiful. She's got an Instagram now with 1 million followers. She's incredible. And her review, she posted her before and afters, and people would come in and be if that's the 1-star review you get, I'm signing up.
That's the worst you can do.
If you could please make me look like her. And it was unbelievable the amount of business I got from that review, because people would be 1 star. And then I think people started thinking this girl's crazy. What are you talking about? Why would she post this? And then they commented, and she took it down because it was just making me way too much business. So I think that's what you're looking for. What's plastic surgery worth? Well, it's worth you having a safe, effective, minimize the complication profile to get the best results possible. And I think that's why people will really figure out what they can spend on plastic surgery, and it's different for everyone.
Yeah. But I guess the question is, but how do people know that? Because yes, you can look at someone's reviews, and that's usually a pretty good indicator. It's actually not bad. I hate Yelp. Google's okay, but like it's a indicator-ish. It's something you can use when you're evaluating surgeons. But other than that, like how else would patients know if a particular surgeon has a high complication profile or does not? Like that's not something that's very much open to the public.
No, it's not out there, and that's a problem because like we talk about it because we try to like create a complete air of transparency and be honest about like this is what we do and this is how it goes, but I'm not sure that and I don't think other doctors would be opposed to that. I think most plastic surgeons are pretty good at what they do, and they'd be happy for people to like have stats. Like I always say, I know more about Mookie Betts' ability to, knock runners in with 2 men on base in the the third inning when he's playing in Boston than people know about their doctors, right? I mean, we have stats on sports players, like we should have those stats on surgeons. I really believe that. It's never going to happen. People would fight it the whole way. I would be happy to participate in that because I think you should know who's operating on you.
You should know, but it is a tricky thing because, I mean, for what we do, perhaps not as much of an issue, but certainly other medical specialties, it's HIPAA, right? You don't know the complexity of the patients they're operating on. You don't know how sick the patients are. So you might have someone who's an excellent surgeon who only takes on the most complicated cases. So of course their complication rates are going to be higher. I'm looking at you, doctor. So it's like, it's not exactly the same as like who's on first or whatever.
No, it's not.
It's way more complicated. So it gets a little bit tricky, and perhaps we're getting into the weeds here. But the whole point is, do your best to figure out like how reliable this particular surgeon is. And then, as you mentioned, everybody's going to have a different budget. So there are certainly surgeons, in particular in Beverly Hills, New York, Miami, San Francisco, and across the board, those places are going to be more expensive. But particular surgeons in those areas are going to be astronomically more expensive than other parts of the country. And usually for good reason, but not everyone's going to be able to afford them. So just because maybe you want the best and the most experienced, it may not be in your budget. So then what do you do? How do you decide who's a good mid-level plastic surgeon for you? And that's where you kind of have to start doing your research. And again, we always say befores and afters.
Yeah, look at the before and afters.
The befores and afters are so key because that is more or less similar to what you are going to get.
100%. And I think, not everybody has to go to Beverly Hills, New York or Miami for, the top, or London for the
Certainly
top plastic
not.
surgeons.
But that's where the higher prices are. That's all.
The prices are higher there because,
yeah.
Agreed. I mean, I know great plastic surgeons in other cities that are amazing.
Over the country.
They're incredible.
And the good ones are probably more expensive in their city, relative
in their city
relative to others. But I don't know that you necessarily need to use price as like the gold standard for making one surgeon better than the other. I think this is where it is helpful to look at different surgeons, look at their social media, look at their results. Don't look at where they vacationed over the summer, and don't look at like where they spent last Friday. Like look like their social life is irrelevant to what your surgery is going to be.
Completely.
So look at their actual professional demeanor, how they present themselves, the work, do you like it? And then go in person and meet several of the ones that you like and see if you vibe with them. Like, do you want to see this person on a regular basis for the next year? Because that's what's going to happen if you have surgery with them. So, like, how do you get along? What's the feeling that you get from these surgeons? And I think that's sort of the best place to go. And then, see what's in your budget.
And I will tell you, when I was in high school, which was before electricity at this point, I remember my classmates who went and got nose jobs, I kind of said, well, what does that cost? And this is not a joke. Like, back in the day, this is in the 80s, the rhinoplasties that they were getting were like $7,500.
That's a decent amount in the 80s.
In the 80s.
Yeah, it's a decent amount.
Wake up call to everybody else. That's 1985. I'm a junior in high school. That is 40 years ago.
Yeah.
40 years ago, a rhinoplasty, they were looking $6,500, $7,500. And if you bring that into today's money, 40 years later, that's probably like $30,000 or $35,000.
Yeah, easily. I think that's probably true. I think my dad bought a Mercedes in the 70s for like $15,000 or $20,000.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So at that time, that was not quite the price of, a higher end car, but it was like
a mid-level
it's up
car.
there. Yeah, it's a mid-level car, at
Yeah.
that time. So how do you value, and I'll tell you, actual quote from a patient, I thought I was paying a lot to you when you did this, breast redo operation, Dr. Calvert, but now that it's done and I have this incredible result, I would have paid a lot more had I known this is what I was getting. And so that's where it's like, are you, and not everybody has the money. So there's some budgetary stuff and they're like money's, like this is really a tough discussion because it's like, yes, I like,
Of course I want the best.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, we like somebody told, like one of the professors told a joke in at Cornell in med school, when I was like in my first year or something like that. They said, when it comes to your fee, like it was like a doctor and a patient talking, and he's like, look, you need to pay me this money. And he's like, well, I'm not going to pay that money because, when it comes, your fees are totally exorbitant. When it comes to my healthcare, money is no object. Basically like, I'm not going to spend it. You're going to do it anyway. And that's just not the way that it works. In plastic surgery, we're paying for the surgery to be safe. We're paying for the right surgery center. We're paying for the right staffing. We're like everything, comes together. And that's why I think, some surgeons, even if you're in like Toledo, Ohio, the highest end guy there is paying for a lot of things that are behind the scenes that are making it turn out the way that,
Right.
he's not just, doing it so he can buy everybody in his family a Rolex. He's doing it because, he or she believes that they need, this PA to work for them, and that PA is the best, and so they're expensive, and I need this nurse to work for me, and that nurse is the
Right.
best, and
I need to have these safety protocols in my OR.
and those are
Yeah.
expensive. Like,
Yeah.
we just upgraded our operating room to a Medicare level. We were quad ASF to begin with, but now we've gone to the next level where we're a Medicare approved OR, and we just got our accreditation with our new operating room, everything. And why did we do that? Because I just want to be gold standard in everything
Right.
that we possibly can in terms of safety. I never want it to be that like we didn't have that or it wasn't
you cut
ready.
corners, yeah.
It's not even cutting corners. Quad ASF we've been quad ASF for a lot of years and it's great. But to get that next level is, it takes more and it's more expensive and it means more medications in the crash card and more everything.
Yeah, more personnel, like everything.
All about safety measures. And so what is that worth? I mean, to me, it's worth a lot. Like I'd spend the money on plastic surgery because I know better. But for patients who are like, oh, I'm trying to deal, like this discussion is for people who are like trying to figure out how you get into this. And it's also, by the way, for the surgeons who are trying to figure out how they value their services.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of young people come out and be like, I need to be cheap just so I get the cases. Okay, that's fine. But you also need to have the money to run your practice properly. So there's somewhere between, the guy who comes out and does, discount Dan sort of approach to, the most expensive guy in the community. And, it's a very hard thing. I mean, setting those fees is really difficult. And as a patient, as a consumer of the services, it's hard to understand what it is exactly that you're paying for.
It's hard to understand what you're paying for. I think that's true. And I think part of the problem that we're having in our current day and age is that there has been what I call commoditization of plastic surgery. Plastic surgery is almost looked at as a commodity amongst our society. The same way that most people feel like they should be able to take, a vacation every so often, or they should be able to get their hair done, or they should have that nice purse because everybody on social media has it and everybody talks about it and it's kind of out more in the open and a little bit more acceptable and everyone posts about their plastic surgery journey. Oh, that's great. We love that exposure, but it makes some people think that they deserve it, that they also too should have it, when maybe they don't have the financial resources at this time to have it. And so then sometimes those people will go looking for the deals and start trying to nickel and dime their way into a cheaper procedure. And I feel like that's where people get in trouble sometimes. Or even if you have the resources, but maybe there's one particular plastic surgeon that's a little bit out of your reach, but you really want to have surgery with them, well, then just wait a little bit longer. Save up if that's what you really want. It's like, yeah, how much is it worth to you, and what are you willing to sacrifice to get that result or that surgeon that you want? Because we've all seen the disasters of people that were trying to save a penny and went and had it done by some hack out in the community who's not even a surgeon, or they went somewhere out of the country and had a disaster, and now they're left with a way worse problem than they ever could have imagined. So how much is it worth to you? How much are you willing to save? People drop tens of thousands of dollars on their cars, on their vacations. Why wouldn't you drop that kind of money on your plastic surgery?
Yeah, I mean, it is, when I hear certain things about, how people make those choices, it's just ill-informed. And so this discussion is, just kind of a frank discussion about the fact that, there is a cost to doing it. I mean, we could get into the weeds on how this business runs, the business of plastic surgery, and I think people would just be shocked at what we pay for. I think they'd be shocked that the surgery center itself has a malpractice policy that costs, $57,000 a year. I think they'd be shocked that not only do we have to have malpractice insurance, but then we also have to have slip and fall insurance, and that we have to have
Disability
insurance for disability,
yeah.
for like if they saw what we spend just to insure the place,
Right.
they'd be like,
How do you make any
even,
money?
how do you even go into work? Like you're beaten out of the gates.
1,000%.
Beaten out of the gates.
Yeah.
It is like it's so crazy. And the part that I'm going to now follow up so that everybody who's listening who's thinking this is nobody feels bad for the plastic surgeons.
Nobody. Yeah,
of
I know.
course not.
Of course not.
So we can whine and complain all we want, but what I'm trying to do is not to say that anybody should feel sorry for it. They shouldn't. We are blessed to do what we do. I love doing it. We make good money. It's fine. We're not Silicon Valley moguls or anything like that, but we do okay, and our living is great. But a lot of people don't. There are a lot of plastic surgeons who don't. And that's they kind of move between sort of like how can I do the case to make payroll. Like there's things that come up for us that I think would be shocking to the public.
Right.
Don't you think? Like
No,
if
I
they
totally agree. I
kind of
think
saw like pull back the curtain and
yeah.
see, they'd be like, "Whoa, you guys are up against it a bit here."
Yeah.
You are.
I mean, it is. You definitely have to work for your money, and it's not easy. And there are plenty of plastic surgeons that really are, not struggling to make ends meet, but they are, at the end of the month, they're looking to see what they have coming in and what's going out.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not necessarily living particularly lavishly, especially here in Los Angeles, New York, where rents and mortgages are out of control.
Yeah.
Like, it's really tough. And, I had a patient I saw somewhere, and she was really, this is kind of related, but kind of not. She was really upset that she was looking at all of these plastic surgeons. She wanted a breast reduction, and she was so upset that all of them were out of network. And she's like, I can't believe that these surgeons don't take insurance for a breast reduction. And I'm like, all of these surgeons you're looking at are really good plastic surgeons. They're going to give you an excellent result. They value their work and what they put out there and what they provide for a patient. And what insurance can reimburse you will cover about 1/10 of all of the expenses you just listed. So how in the world can you expect that plastic surgeon to take insurance? They will never be able to make any of their ends meet. So that's why most private practice plastic surgeons in urban areas, a lot of them are out of network because they just can't practice. They literally cannot keep their practice open on what insurance would
no,
reimburse.
Are you kidding?
It's a slap in the face. And so a lot of times that's why surgeons are employed by hospitals and facilities, and that's great. That's where you can go and have your insurance coverage surgeries done. And those surgeons are great too. But I think people don't understand how expensive it is to run a private practice. And that, part of that goes into the cost.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at it because hospitals get all kinds of privilege financially.
It's totally different. It's a totally different setup, reimbursement system.
I mean,
yeah,
all kinds of privilege because they provide emergency services
Right.
for the community. We're a little surgery center. We get no benefit whatsoever to being available for. And the fact that we are now a Medicare facility means that we are part of a national disaster plan. Like our facility does a lot of things, but we get none of the benefit that a hospital does. And so the people say, well, how can the hospital-based plastic surgeon take insurance for this breast reduction? I'll tell you why. Because maybe they only get $1,500 for the surgeon fee from, Blue Shield of California, but they got $89,000 for the hospital fee.
The hospital, not the surgeon.
Not for the surgeon.
No.
This is not to the surgeon.
So
this is to the facility, to the hospital.
This is what hospitals have done. They have negotiated prices with the insurance companies that super inflated the fees and reimbursements they get for the OR and the hospital stay. And in return, they downgraded how much the physicians were paid.
100%.
And it didn't matter to the physicians that were employed at the hospital because they were getting a salary or they were getting a payout that's different than the actual reimbursement from the insurance company. But what the trickle-down effect of that is that those insurance companies took that super low negotiated insurance rate that the hospital negotiated for their surgeons and then applied it to the surgeons in the community that have no hospital affiliations and are really depending on that insurance reimbursement as their sole fee.
Right.
So it's the community, non-employed, non-hospital physicians that really got screwed in all of these hospital insurance contract negotiations. And that's why you're seeing the death of the private practice physician.
Well, and it's
that takes insurance.
That takes insurance. Yeah. Right. So you can go to the hospital employed doctor and you can get whatever you get there. But if you want these experts are all out in private practice and you're going to pay cash for their expertise. Right. And so what's that worth for you? That's the discussion today. The discussion is think about what you value in your result with the caveat, of course, I'm telling you, just because you go to somebody like us who are, out in the community doing, amazing private practice work doesn't mean you're not going to have complications, doesn't mean you're going to have everything work.
Right.
There are all kinds of issues that come up. I am not going to sit here and tell anybody that's going to, because you paid more, you're going to get a great, spectacular result. I can tell you, though, that if you pick these surgeons who are known for their work and have a track record, that you're stacking the cards in your favor. That is for sure.
Yes, 1,000%.
And that's all you want to do. That's all you can do. And, I'm the last guy to I check my ego at the door when I walk into the surgery center, into the office, anything, because I know that medicine is fraught with, issues that are just difficult to predict and difficult to anticipate. But when you're going to people with great track records, they're the ones that are thinking of those things. Those are the ones that have your best interest at heart and that want to, and the hospital-based guys do too. They're fine.
They're great.
They're great. But there's different levels. And so as you decide what am I going to spend on plastic surgery, just think about, what is it worth to you? And then say, is it worth, the same price as my car? Is it worth the same price as, my kid's tuition? Is it worth the same price as, what I have to spend to go on a vacation? Like there are levels that you can kind of put into the mix to understand it and give you some perspective, especially when you look at somebody like me, because you need a revision rhinoplasty that's going to cost you north of $50,000 or something like that. It's like, God, what's it worth to me? Is it
or do I want to walk around with this nose that is, killing me?
Or am I going to take the shot with somebody that's a lot less money? And there are plenty of people that do great revision rhinoplasty that are way less expensive than me because they in Beverly Hills. They can be a lot of different places. But I think that's something to consider, and it's something to understand. And I thought this was an important point to make, just so that people have some idea of how to weigh the cost of their plastic surgery that they need to have done.
Right. It's not a straight deposit into our checking accounts. There's a lot of things that go into why we have the fees that we do.
That can be another discussion. We'll do the economics of plastic surgery later, and then when somebody figures it out, they can teach it to me because I still struggle with this on a daily basis. Yeah. Anything else, Dr. Rovelo?
No, that's it.
Well, in that case, this is the Beverly Hills Plastic Surgery Podcast coming to you from the 90210.